All right, Chris, we're back. We've been talking before we're recording about the death of Hollywood. I think we started with Justine Bateman
Yeah.
and your take on, kind of enjoying her sharing her view of where the industry stands. We were talking about The Brutalist, which I haven't seen. I did want to ask you, have you read The Fountainhead?
I didn't get through it.
Really, it's one of my favorite books. I literally couldn't put it down. I read it in 3 days. I
So,
couldn't put it down.
here's a story though. One of my mentors, Arthur Finkelstein, who was a pollster, when he was in college, he had a radio show at like midnight to fucking 3 a.m. or whatever it was, and he used to play records and do stuff. But he also interviewed Ayn Rand,
Oh, shit.
and he would sit there and talk with her, and they apparently it was not said, but they would sit there and talk and do drugs all night.
Oh,
And
crazy.
have like bullshit sessions, which was, the tapes
Huh.
no longer exist, but it would really be kind of fun.
Wow.
But he was very big on her.
How did he enter her orbit? Like, how did they connect?
I want to say she was like a visiting. Did,
Uh,
I forget. Did he go? I forget if he went to NYU or maybe not. But she was a visiting professor or lecturer, and he just said, "Hey, I do this radio show. Do you want to be on it? It's midnight." And she's like, "Fuck yeah, I'm doing meth, and I'm great, and I'm going to come in."
That's
And
funny.
but yeah, but it was you know
She's like, yeah, I've been up for 3 days. Let's do a show,
yeah,
baby.
man, yeah, you're right. But he loved her. But it's kind of an
Interesting.
interesting.
I I don't. I mean, I like I said, I love the Fountainhead. I I don't know why she. I mean, I certainly think that she was libertarian on the cusp of being just absolutely fucking nuts sometimes.
Yeah,
But I feel like that's a little overplayed in her books. I mean, Atlas Shrugged is very much a bit of a magnum opus to that ideology. Fountainhead, I never found that way. I felt like it was more, it was maybe the person in the time when I read it, but I just felt like it was more about living by convictions and stuff. I
yeah,
mean, it was in a modern sensibility way, like for these two people to be in love, Howard Rourke and Dominique, and he rapes her the first time they have said, like
right.
you are a little bit like, oh shit, like what's in the mind of this woman? Um, but I feel like some of that gets overplayed, even on both sides, like the fanboys of her, and on the those who love to hate her. I feel like she had a clear point of view, but I don't know that that was always the point that she was trying to make. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, and I get it. I've not seen either. I think there were two movies made. There was one in the 30s with Gary
Oh.
Cooper, who did
Of Atlas Shrugged or Fountainhead?
The Fountainhead.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I
Gary
haven't seen
Cooper,
any movies.
and and I've seen it, but it's been so long since I've seen it. Um,
Yeah,
but it might be
interesting movie.
interesting to check out.
Wasn't
The
she the lover of one of the Rothschilds?
Yeah, she got around. I mean, she
Yeah.
was very much a free spirit, which was not uncommon for women of her demeanor, and I mean, they broke a lot of rules. I mean, by the way, there was somebody pointed out, you're talking about like stuff that's overplayed out of books. Somebody pointed out, it was Walter Kern, who wrote Up in the Air, and he's a interesting guy, kind of interesting novelist, cultural novelist who's kind of turned into this conspiracy theorist, and he's kind of
Okay.
fun to follow. Um, but in the most recent editions of 1984, at the front, they've got trigger warnings about that, you know, sexual stereotypes and insight.
Drug use
I'm like,
and yeah.
yeah, and you're like, what, what? And it's like, what's
Just to
yeah,
just to touch on, women of that ilk. I think last week we talked about me reading Sleeping with the Enemy about Coco Chanel. While the woman certainly redefined fashion, and I wouldn't take
uh-huh,
anything away from her talent in fashion, all of that was available. I think we may have said before recording or after that she was really started as a courtesan to some wealthy men.
yeah,
But if you read anything about, let's say, pre World War II, you start to realize that all of our great grandparents, grandparents, they were all a bunch of like junkie whores. You're like, what were they doing? You read a couple books about the Roaring Twenties, man. Like great grandma was up to some shit. And we are now so we've criminalized so much shit that was just a part of how people lived back in the day that it isn't. I don't know that it was by design, but damn, it's really shifted the culture. And I don't know in great ways. I mean, I certainly think like being junkie whores is not the way to go through life. But on the other hand, plenty of people did it and they
It
ended up
certainly
like,
was.
winning wars at the same time. So it's like,
Yeah. Well, my grandmother was. I don't think she was a junkie, but she worked in a whorehouse. You know,
oh, really?
the family piece is that, well, she was doing laundry, and there's other pieces that are kind of like she might have been doing more than laundry. You know, and but she was, you know, she was out there. I mean, my parents weren't married, but but they lived this very conventional post-war America lifestyle, but they weren't
Yeah.
married.
Right.
And my grandmother, you know, my grandmother killed her husband. Yeah, you know, he was abusive. And so
Yeah.
she fucking killed him. And the cops looked the other way because they knew it was like, yeah, he was beaten her. Fuck it. He got what he deserved.
Oh, shit.
You know, but that's kind of like, that's that culture, you know? I mean, it's,
Dude, this is the first time hearing this. This is like,
oh yeah.
I think we
Yeah.
should do an entire, we should just interview you. This is crazy shit.
I have a colorful family history.
That's
Uh,
amazing. I mean, not that's sad that she was beaten and it's sad that it came to that and all that, but that's like, I've never heard a family story. Like, I
oh
didn't
yeah,
expect you to say that.
yeah, we have, yes.
Wow.
My family is interesting. Uh,
So, how long did your grandmother live? Like, how old?
She lived. She didn't crack 100. I think she lived in 98, 99.
Oh, damn, good for her.
Yeah.
Wow.
You know, I've got pictures of her. She was thrown off the beach for indecent exposure.
I
Uh, be-
love grandma.
because you know, and what it was she had her bathing suit above the knee and shit like that. You
Oh,
know, back
okay,
in the day.
okay.
But I've got pictures of her, you know, on the beach with like her, you know, dress way up and stuff like that.
I
Uh,
thought you meant like in her 90s, she was kicked off a beach for
no,
indecent
I wish.
exposure.
I wish. No, she was. I mean, she was. You know, she
She sounds
stole a
cool as
lot.
shit.
Yeah, she stole a lot too. She lied a lot. You know, what was really
Wow.
funny is that when, you know, finally when she was in her mid, I guess she was like 95, 96.
Yeah.
Um, you know, she had to go into a home. She was living with my mother for a while.
Mm.
Um, but she used to leave like the stove on all the time.
So this
Uh,
is your mom's mom, your maternal
yeah,
grandmother.
yeah. And so finally, you know, she had to go to a home. And I used to go visit her in the home, and she had dementia. And she didn't know who he was. She thought either I was her firstborn son or her husband.
Mm.
And
That's dangerous as shit for you, bud.
so she used to have, and it's funny because I didn't look a thing like either of them, but she would, you know, just have these conversations about, you know, for my grandfather, the one that she killed, he was an alcoholic, but he was also a brilliant engineer. And among the things that he did is he worked on, I think, the second lock in the Panama Canal. So I've got all these pictures of her from the Panama Canal, and she would talk about it's too hot down here and it's humid. We got to get back, and I want to go back. You know, um,
So she went with them. They lived in the canal zone.
yeah, they lived in the canal zone. We've got all these pictures of them building the canal. They're there when they're building the fucking canal. And I also have pictures of him. He was Eddie Rickenbacker's crew chief when he won the Indianapolis 500.
What?
Yeah.
That
Uh,
is the coolest fucking thing. I mean, I'm
yeah.
okay. Keep going.
No, I mean, you know, you know, and there are all kinds of other family stories which were mostly untrue. But no, I mean, it's like on that side of the family was fucking wild. They came off the boat. They came off the boat from. They weren't Irish, but they came over and they said they were Irish. Okay,
Ah,
but they came off and they wound up being like off the boat. Do you want to be a citizen? If you've seen the movie Gangs in New York,
yeah, yeah.
the boat. Do you want to be a citizen? Yeah, you're in the fucking army.
Right.
And they got put in the Fighting 69th. And was it Shiloh? Whatever God, it was one of the big battles. And then they deserted.
Take the citizenship and run, baby.
Yeah, I mean that's what they did, and they deserted after like the first big battle, which they were lucky to survive. Because you know, dumb dudes off the fucking boat, you go in the front line and make the charge. It wasn't Shiloh, God. Anyway, but yeah, I mean, you know, but
What
again,
a
yeah,
crazy good story.
yeah, but they were fucking wild, you know, and
My mother's gonna kill me for saying this, but
uh,
like, I know nothing about my grandparents. Like my
Okay.
grandmother lived to 96. My maternal grandmother. I went and saw her maybe 4 years before she passed. She also would occasionally refer to her ex-husband as her father, or her dead husband as her father, but never became American citizens. Actually, my maternal grandfather did. My maternal grandmother never did. And that's all I know about them. They came from England. I know that my grandmother was half Italian, half Welsh, and my grandfather was entirely Welsh, and that's it. Like we've joked, like my sisters and other people, like my cousins. There's got to be some horrible shit in that background.
Yeah.
Like to the two people, and when I met my grandmother before she passed, like 4 years before she passed, last time I saw her, she said she wanted to go to India and my grandfather wanted to go to the US and he won the debate. But
Wow.
she wanted to go to India
Wow.
in 56, 57.
Now, why?
She said that was like where she wanted to go of the former colonies, I guess, like one of her sisters ended up in Australia, one in Hawaii, and then a couple of siblings stayed in England. Um,
Now,
but
when was Indian independence?
40
48.
49,
Yeah.
yeah. And that post-war period, I mean, so much shit happened.
Yeah.
Israel, Tibet, like all of these
Yeah.
things, right? It's like, but it was like, yeah, 48, 49. Because I think 48, 49 was when Pakistan and India ruptured. So it must have been a year or two before that, because it was like independence, and then suddenly, you know, 100 million people are going this way and 100 million people are going that way. And it's like, we got two different countries. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's like, at least like what your grandmother did. Me, I'm like, I don't know what these motherfuckers did. I don't. They got run out of a country.
It was probably really interesting
Yeah,
and probably a bit shady, you know? I mean, which is kind of fun. I mean, it's,
yeah.
my father was a different story. I mean, we're way off tangent here, but my father in World War II, he was a staff sergeant in the Philippines, and they used to do bombing runs. And if you've seen the show Masters of Air or the old movie 12 O'Clock High, what his job was that B-17s would go out with 10 crew and 20 would go out, and they would count them coming back. And if 20 went out and 15 came back at 10 crews, that's 50 letters of condolences he had to write next to kin
Oh,
letters. And he also would have to go through all their personal belongings to make sure there was nothing,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
that was kind of hurtful to them.
Right.
But he never graduated, which is interesting because I've got his letters from the war. And he didn't graduate high school. He was a tradesman. He was a barber, hence the great family hair, I guess.
Yeah,
And
I know, right? Lucky you.
yeah, but you can watch his writing get better and better and better and better. And by the end of the
Uh,
war, he could write really well.
wow.
Here's the kicker: when he came back from the war, he never wrote again. And there was nothing like a postcard. The only thing you can find his any writing on would be on like a signature on a driver's license or on a form. And anything that had to be handwritten, my mother would write and he would sign. He would not write. And, very
Wow.
clearly he was suffering from
Of
PTSD,
course. Yeah, of
undiagnosed.
course.
But that's
What a
a really
horrible
fun
job.
thing. Yeah. But like I said, they're, interesting family, colorful.
Yeah, we did go a bit off topic, but the funny thing, because we started with vaudeville,
Yeah.
of the two grandparents that came over from England, my maternal grandmother, her father, my maternal great grandfather, was a very famous vaudevillian actor in England and Wales.
Oh, wow.
And my grandfather, she ended up running off and marrying this extremely poor, dirt poor guy from a coal town in Wales. So I've always just assumed that that's why they left. They were like, we better get that, her father ended up dying kind of young. But yeah, so like just assume that's what it was. You have this like spoiled little rich girl that runs off with like, this super poor guy,
Right.
and they're like, well, let's go start a new life in either India or the US. And he's like, well, I can probably get a job in the US. So
Right. Yeah.
um you mentioned 12 o'clock high or 12 o'clock noon or
Yeah.
whatever that movie's called. Have you ever seen the documentary about Steve Bannon, about how much he loves that movie, and like how he thinks it like is basically where the US needs to go or something.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's such an
Yeah.
interesting. I'm gonna bastardize it, so I'll just leave it there because
Yeah.
I saw the
Steve, Steve,
documentary.
Steve Bannon.
Steve Bannon, yeah, I want to say I
Right.
saw that documentary like I think it came out 2017, 2018. You know,
Okay.
post that first victory, and I want to say it was like a CNN special 1 hour documentary thing with
I'll look it
Steve
up.
Bannon.
I mean, it's a very good movie. It's Gregory Peck, and it's a very good movie. How much veracity it has is a different story, but you really kind of get the feeling for, um, the bombing war in Europe, and the Brits were like, "Fuck it, we're just bombing at night, and we're gonna,"
Yeah.
But for a while, the Americans believed in daylight precision bombing,
Mm,
which means that you flew low in the middle of the day, and the whole idea was to lessen civilian casualties.
right.
At some point they all said fuck it, and they just kind of
They went the opposite direction with firebombing Dresden.
right, right. Well, yeah, that was the whole thing, and then you go to then you go to the war in the Pacific with Japan, and you couldn't do precision bombing just because apparently the air currents around Japan and just
Mm.
so at some point that they
Having spent time in Japan, by the way, I was very struck my first time in Japan when you like stay in places and they still love their like wooden houses. And I'm like, did you all not learn anything from the firebombing of Tokyo? Like, why is everything still made of wood? You know what I mean? Like, eh,
Yeah, I mean, they were burning, firebombing 100,000 people in these fucking cities because everything fucking.
everybody everybody talks about the nuclear bombs. Like, we killed millions before even that. Like,
Yeah, I mean, there is. I've mentioned it before. It's called The Road to Surrender, and a very
mm,
interesting book. Um, but part of the calculation was that by if we drop the bomb and they do surrender, we're going to save lives in the long run because of the invasion. But they were like, "Fuck it, we're gonna like the projections were we're killing 100,000 at a time anyway. So what's another 100,000?
exactly.
And again,
Exactly.
it's the book is interesting because it goes to adults,
Mm,
and when there are people that are good and bad in the book, but what comes across is that how thoughtful they were with the responsibility they had,
mm.
and and because there are memos and diaries and shit where they were like, you know. I think it was it Groves or Stimson, or was it Groves or Tui Spates, maybe, or no, I think it was Curtis LeMay. Curtis LeMay said, if we lose this war, we're going to be tried as war criminals, right? You guys know that because we're
Yeah.
firebombing civilians in cities. You guys get that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they took that, they took the responsibility weighed very heavily on them. And it's also
Mhm.
interesting that like technology, like they dropped the bomb on Hiroshima, and then they had to send. So they dropped the bomb one day, and they have to send fucking planes over, and they film over, but there's nothing to film because it's all smoke. They have to wait another day or so for it to clear. Then they take the picture, then they take it back to the base, then they develop it, then they fly it fucking 30 hours to the United States to Washington, D.C., so that the president and the Secretary of Defense can look and say, well, is that what it looks like? Because Truman didn't know shit, he had to have people explain to him what was this on the map? Because it looks
Yeah.
like, anyway, it's really remarkable the kind of the technology or that kind of thing. And then, for 2 days, they didn't know that they really had bombed it because talk about military incompetency, is that the coded message that had to go to the Secretary of Defense got stuck in another pile and was stuck in Manila for 12 hours. And you kind of go like,
Crazy.
but it's, it's really interesting. But by the way, since we're talking about like old things
Yeah.
and military, I saw that they are renaming battleships again. Navy Hegseth is renaming shit again, like the
Yeah.
military's renaming stuff again, which is like there's a fair amount of performative outrage on all sides on this. That
Okay.
we spent 10 years renaming shit, and
Yeah.
now we're renaming shit again, and it's like
Yeah.
you kind of go like,
Yeah. It's so crazy. I wanted to. This nuclear talk is actually a really
yeah,
interesting one into the attack by Ukraine on Russia
yeah,
and what they've accomplished. It could be a Pyrrhic victory, but
yeah.
just briefly, because I think you're going to love this story. Let me just share with you.
Yeah.
I'm in Hiroshima in 2018. Never been there. It's a crazy place to be. I go to the dome, the A-bomb dome, which was one of the few buildings in Hiroshima at the time. It was actually built by a French company, I believe, and it's steel and concrete, which is one of the few steel and concrete buildings.
Mhm.
So it survived where none of the other buildings really did. And it's still there. And it had a steel dome and it's all fucked up, but you can go to it and you go to this. It's in Remembrance Park area. So it's like on one side of like a pond, and then the Remembrance Park is on the other. And I meet this guy who's in his, I don't know, late 50s, maybe early 60s. Shit, I don't know. He had to have been even older. Long story short, he has like 7 different binders. And what the binders are histories of World War II and the dropping of the A bombs in different languages.
Oh,
And
wow.
he approaches me and he's like, English? And I said, yeah, I'm from America. He's like, oh, okay. So he hands it to me and I'm going through it. And I get to like the last page and it's this elderly woman and I'm reading it. It's his mother who had just celebrated like her 97th birthday and was from Hiroshima. And he is one of the youngest survivors of the A bomb in utero. She was pregnant with him when it happened.
Wow.
And
Wow.
I'm like, just listening to this guy's story, and it was very similar to the story that we started with like your family. I was like enthralled, like, I can't believe that. How did she survive? How did you like no health issues? She's in her 90s. Good for her. God, hoping she's still alive, I guess, and healthy. But so it was insane. And he said, it wasn't just Americans who caused the harm. It was our country too. He was like, we brought it on. And he didn't put it in those words per se, but almost something very similar to that. I was like, we understand that war in general leads to these horrible things. And it was both sides. And he was very even handed in the binder in English. Anyway, I don't know what it said if you got like the
Right.
Japanese
Right. Right.
version, but yeah. But it was such an interesting story. And her picture at the end was like, oh my God, this woman is like at her 97th birthday or whatever it was at the time. Like,
It sounds like a great, I mean, we should pitch that as a Marvel movie origin story,
hell
right?
yes.
Right.
Hell yes.
I mean, fuck it up. It's like Survivor in Utero, Survivor of Hiroshima. Like, fuck, I want
100%. Yeah.
right?
Well, that's like literally, I don't remember what the name of the movie is, but that Wesley Snipes movie about being a vampire, he's like half vampire, not or something,
Oh,
is
Blade.
like
Blade?
yeah, his mother was attacked by a vampire while he was in utero. So he has like these special
Yeah.
magical powers. 100%. Now,
Yeah,
to go
exactly.
back to what we were talking about before we even started recording, I think that's what the kind of movie Hollywood should be making, right? If you're
Right.
gonna make a special character movie, I'm so tired of like the X-Men and like the whatever, like the Iron Mans of the world. That would be amazing.
Yeah. And it's like, if I never see time travel as a movie plot again, I'll be fine. You know,
Totally.
there was a movie that they made us um, when I was in film school, Alan Rene, and it's called Hiroshima Mon Amour. And
Oh,
I think it's 64 or something, but it's this kind of incredibly tedious movie about when you said the site, the memorial site,
yeah.
it's built around that and some affair some guy has with a Japanese woman, and it's
How very
like,
French.
yeah, but like imagine like the worst French pretentious movie.
Oh yeah.
That's what it is, and it's
Yeah.
I mean, again, it has merit. It's kind of considered a classic, but I'm too jeune, I'm too American.
Yeah, yeah.
Shit,
Well, what about To Russia with Love from Ukraine? Let's
yeah,
dig
right,
into
yeah,
that
let's
a
dig
little
into that,
bit.
right?
Um, I mean, what did they wipe out? I mean, who knows what the actual estimates are, but at least let's say a third of the
Yeah,
strategic bomber fleet
yeah,
and an attack on the submarine base as well, right? So
yeah.
my
On the
understanding
other
and some
side of
of
the
the
fucking country, right? I mean,
insane, I mean, the
that
way they did it was so smart. And I remember thinking to myself, Trump kept saying, "You don't got the cards. You don't got the cards." I'm thinking they got the fucking cards if they have some support. That's all. That's my
yeah,
guess. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah. And I wonder. I mean, fuck it, that's a movie. I want to watch that movie right now. But like
Hell yeah.
the I the whole logistics to that and where they got it and who had the expertise, because that was a really sophisticated. That wasn't that wasn't a. I don't think that was Ukrainian military pure
Are you
operation.
saying there was a 3-letter agency involved in
Yeah,
that?
yeah, or maybe or somebody else. But like that was pretty. It was something because because it wasn't a terrorist thing. We're going to blow shit up. It was a military attack.
That's right.
It wasn't
That's
we're
right.
going to blow up a town square with incendiary bombs or something. This was
Right.
like yeah, but it
Which
was
they have done, by the way. Haven't they assassinated a
yeah
couple of high-level people in
yeah
Moscow, right?
yeah
Through terrorist attacks, right?
yeah.
If
Even
you
though
want
with
to call them
Russia,
that.
it's tough to when somebody goes, it's tough to
Yeah.
tell who's in
Yeah,
charge, right?
there's certainly deniability built into that situation, right?
Yeah,
Like it
yeah.
wasn't us, it was the other Russians.
It was the other Russians, but yeah, no, it's it was fascinating. I mean, I wonder if this pushes them closer to the table.
Or farther away. Does it push them farther away?
There was I read a piece of an article that said Russia has lost over 1 million men in this war so far,
Hmm.
which I went, nah, that can't be right. At the same time, when you think about World War I and World War II in Russia, you go, it could be right.
Yeah,
You know,
it certainly fits the MO.
yeah, it's like, yeah, peasant, yeah, commander, go. Here's a pitchfork, but especially you read about Russia in World War I, and like no wonder it was a fucking revolution.
For sure.
It's like
For sure.
these poor bastards off the farm, conscript them and send them to the front lines with like no weapons, not like
Right.
here's an old gun, no, like no weapons, charge.
Totally. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You'll
Um,
have a weapon once you beat the shit out of the German
yeah,
on the other side.
yeah, we have a rock.
Yeah.
Um,
Use it wisely.
yeah, we have a rock for the glory of the czar. Yeah, no, but
Is now not a good time though? I mean, it does
yeah,
seem to be the perfect time for Trump to step in
yes,
and say, what's the saying? Always give your enemy a golden bridge on which to retreat. You know, you don't want one of the 3 dominant nuclear powers on Earth to feel boxed in, right? And they've now lost part of their nuclear triad. I mean, they're very on their heels. Seems like a good opportunity to step in and say, listen, you keep Crimea, give back Donbass. You've lost, and you frame it in a way that it's a victory, right? What bigger victory than to claim the ports of Crimea as your exit out into the Mediterranean and all of these other things? And it's a victory, right? It does seem like it's a diplomatic opportunity, right?
yeah. I mean, but you don't realize how crazy they are. I mean, to go back to this atomic bomb book, even after they dropped the second bomb, the Japanese still did not surrender, and there were people within the government that wanted to surrender, but people
Yeah.
that didn't. And literally the day before, actually, if I've said this before, because it's so fucking fascinating. So the emperor is finally convinced that he needs to surrender and he needs to broadcast it. So they made an LP. They made a fucking record. They made a 78 record with him doing it so it could be rebroadcast. The Imperial War Council, who's still deciding, I think there were 5 members and 3 were like, fuck no, we're going to fight to the very end, have decided that, like, no, we're going to not allow the emperor to do this. And technically he works for us. And so they're running through, so they dispatch soldiers to find this fucking record. And these soldiers are running through the emperor's palace and fighting fucking samurai as they're looking for this record. And they didn't find the record. Meanwhile, they're like, massacring people in this palace, but they didn't find the record because they hid the record where the geishas were. And the
Oh.
soldiers were too sensitive that, like, that was like, you can go fucking torture and maim and kill, but we're not going to go see the geishas because of that. And that's where they hid the record,
Oh my God.
So, and it's this fascinating cultural piece about that. But yeah, but even after they bombed 2 cities, and again, they were on their way to bomb Tokyo. I mean, they had another bomb and they're ready to go bomb Tokyo.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Wow. That's crazy. Yeah, and I mean that is actually another interesting. I don't think we live in an era where total war and total surrender is possible. So this idea, I'm not one of the haters on Ukraine or
mhm,
Zelensky. Actually, I rather admire both for the fight that they've put up.
mhm.
Um, and it is I think, a very bad precedent to set for Russia to be able to walk away with something after
Yeah,
causing this situation. However, and especially because we took their nuclear weapons and guaranteed their borders and stuff like that in the 90s. However, I think in the modern world, you're not going to get total surrender from Russia. And now that you have them on their heels, if you can broker only giving up Crimea, which come on, I mean, is it Russia? Is it Ukraine? That's yeah, we can quibble, but why? So it does seem to me that like it's your only option at this point. It is your only option. You can't keep escalating because eventually it will keep escalating, and that's not. They need to know there is a boundary there. But B, if the talks do fall apart, I'm on the side. I'm personally in the camp of like we should just keep financing and funding them and arming them and let them keep doing what they're doing and just keep bleeding Russia until it bleeds out. If not, like I said, I do believe giving your enemies a way out is the right way to win sometimes. So
Yeah,
it's an interesting
yeah.
question. Do you think Trump is the one to do that?
Yes, yes. I think he is. Like, what is the deal? I don't know. I'm kind of instinctually like, fuck him, don't give him anything. But that's probably not. But I think that's something Ukraine's got to decide what they're going to give because clearly they have to give something. What that is or what that looks like. But at the
It
same
seems
time,
an easy win for Trump because he can say,
yeah,
listen, they lost Crimea in 2014. That had nothing to do with me. Where I'm just going back to what Obama lost, and I'm bringing peace. And if they could get the Ukrainians to sign off on that, then
yeah.
that seems easy.
Well, that's the whole thing. Obama lost it. That's the way you would sell it.
That's right.
And by the way, like Nobel Prize winner, Nobel Peace Prize winner Donald J. Trump, right? Would
Totally.
that be fucking wild?
100%.
I mean, that people, I don't think they'd ever give it to him. Um,
If he could get
yeah,
that peace, he
yeah,
would be more deserving than Obama ever was.
yeah. But I don't think they would ever give it to him. But like,
Yeah,
I would like to see him get it just for the fucking meltdown. I mean, it would be hysterical.
for sure.
By the way, speaking of meltdown, we're kind of go around the thing. The $20 million Democrat initiative, Let's Talk to Men thing. Uh,
Yeah,
they
yeah,
had they released the first part of the study,
yeah.
and it was 30 focus groups and surveys around the country. Somebody online said it was male Orientalism, which was a fucking. I wish I had thought of that. But the idea that you have to study men to know. I mean, treating it like a foreign species, like you're going on fucking safari,
Totally.
and like you can't, and they can't see implicitly the problem. As
Yeah.
bad and by the way, same thing with Republican with women traditionally. I mean, that's changed a little bit, but that was like you're just tone deaf. It's just like, you know, do you know any men? Okay. I mean, it's
I think we're historically known for not being that complicated, actually.
yeah, yeah.
Maybe just don't treat us like shit. You know what I mean? Like, and maybe don't state that men are responsible for all the ills of the world. Just start there. I
Well,
think,
if you look at like where the age group and the problem they have specifically with younger men,
yeah.
um, in the early 2010s, everything was rape culture,
Right.
whether it was or not.
Right.
And but there was this whole kind of feminization of, I think, the Democratic Party that not candidates, but culturally, it felt like everything was run by effeminate men and angry women. And
Totally.
whether that's fair or not, but that's certainly the perception, and it's certainly my perception. You would see people fucking screaming on TV every night. And again, it's not it's not to not take seriously the male culture and sexism and rape and all that shit. But it was like they made young men the victims
Hmm.
when they weren't.
Right.
Or they made not the victims. They made young
The
men
perpetrators.
the
Yeah.
perpetrators when they were older men. And it was like there were not young men in fucking Hollywood raping actresses,
Right. Right. Right.
right? That they were older rich men who were Democratic fundraisers.
Right.
That's who
Right.
was
Right.
fucking doing that shit.
Right. Right.
You know,
Right. Right.
bad behavior at universities for the most part, were people with Ivy League degrees.
Yeah. Yeah.
People in
Yeah.
the arts and letters. These were men from elite institutions. They weren't
Totally.
the fucking poor slob working in the mechanic shop.
Yeah.
And I think that in order to solve a problem, they accuse somebody who wasn't guilty.
Yeah, or they punish the son for the sins of the father.
Yeah,
Um,
you just you just summarized fucking 5 minutes of my bullshit with that. Yeah,
well, I mean, it's interesting because I've stopped talking to some people who every interaction is about the patriarchy, and I'm like, man,
yeah,
this is just fucking exhausting. Why
it's
don't you just
exhausting.
try worrying about your own behavior, and then
Yeah,
like the world will be a much better place, right?
yeah.
Listen to the Michael Jackson song. Start with the fucking man in the mirror, okay? Like, calm down. But it is a catch 22 because anytime you try to argue, and I've made this argument,
Mhm,
been around the world, seen a lot of different places. One thing I've seen is that the most abusive men are in cultures where sons are the most privileged and mothers do that privileging.
mhm,
And I have made the statement that it isn't a patriarchy. Nothing in life is a patriarchy. Nowhere on fucking earth because we're all raised by our mothers. It's a
mhm,
matriarchy, is what it is. And now that is always flipped back and like, oh, women have to exist in a patriarchal. Listen, every guy has to go to sleep at night, and if he doesn't wake up the next day because he pissed his wife off, like they have complete control, and they know they do because they brag about it most of the fucking time. Happy
mhm.
wife, happy life. We have all these things, and but you can't ever say that because the moment you say it, like, oh, you're the problem, and like you just don't see the patriarchy. It's like you keep talking about this nebulous thing. You mentioned culture, and I think it's an important thing to like, it's intentional, and I don't think we give it enough credit. One of the things when I worked in entertainment, I had this conversation with someone, and I was like, the interesting thing is a majority of creative executives in entertainment are women. Not a massive majority, but over 50%. There's some reasons about that. Some of it might have to do with the unfairness of like being in other positions, like mostly men and are directors and this and that and da da da. So they end up becoming creative executives instead. But then to get an idea of how women see the world, look at what's being made because they're the ones giving the green light. So my example has been, at least in the 90s and early 2000s, every family sitcom had a smart wife who was frustrated with her stupid, do no good husband. And oftentimes he was the punchline to everybody in the family, including the kids.
Mhm.
This, there's a reason these things exist. They are a reflection of our culture or how people see our culture or people in it. I think what you're seeing now is nothing more than a swinging of the pendulum against that idea and way of viewing families, that both the mother and the father should be equally respected by the children, and they should be contributors to the family. And if you look at the reality, that is actually usually the case, is that two income households, both people working very hard to try to provide for their family, right?
Right.
So that would be my take on it, is like, maybe just don't buy into the bullshit from the 90s and maybe earlier and early 2000s, and actually embrace the fact that actually maybe trad families, whatever that looks like for you, is a good way to go. Just because it's called that doesn't mean it's something negative. You know what I mean?
There are some interesting studies. I mean, well, it is an irrefutable fact that if you eliminated single mothers, you could eliminate child poverty.
Mm.
Whether you're a single mother on purpose. And again, I was raised by a single mom. That's, you but we also lived in, not great circumstances for a lot of it. And it's just because it's a hard job to raise kids. It's a hard job
Hell
to
yeah.
have a house. It's a hard job. But I think where this kind of men problem has happened for Democrats is that if you look over time, younger women have gotten progressively liberal, and now they're at the most liberal. They're more liberal than older women. They're more liberal than older
Right.
self-identified liberal men. And so there's this kind of reaction to younger men saying, "Ah, fuck it," right? And I also think, if you look now, more younger women than men go to college, and
It's
they
so
make more
interesting.
money, and they
Yeah. Is part of the question, or part of the underlying thing I've asked myself, is that is marriage and some of these things, are they a natural state of being, or were they a requirement for survival in times of, maybe to support the idea of a patriarchy, of disadvantaged wealth? So for instance, like I, I think I told you, I don't know if we were recording yet, but we took my mother to see a comedian over the
Right.
weekend. And the comedian is a very well-known comedian. She's only 31, but she's been doing it for a long time. I'm sure she makes a ton of money. Good for her. She came out, I guess, in the last year or so as bisexual. And she said, the more money I make, the less I want to be with a man. She said, Mama deserves to be with somebody pretty. And everybody laughed. That's
Right.
great.
Yeah.
But it's also incredibly true to a sense of like, if you're making $1 million a year as a woman, just in her situation, but let's say you're even making mid six figures or something as a educated woman, do you want a partner that might only make 80 grand as a plumber? And like, I mean, there are other value things, but if women were only with men as a form of security to be able to have what they needed while having children, have that support system, which is probably what naturally was the cause. If you no longer need that security, what is there to really keep people together?
Mhm.
You know, maybe the natural state of things is that single mothers is a natural state of things. Fathers went off and died in wars with other villages and shit like that. And it took a village to raise a child.
Mhm.
Maybe that's the where we're going.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you need strong community support. People tend to marry within their social and economic class. That's just what you do. I mean, there are Cinderella stories, but they are foreign. That's just not the natural order of things. And everybody I know kind of has married within kind of their class. And, so I always think it's funny that, you always see some, you know, dimwit talking about the end of the nuclear family and how it's regressive in patriarchy. And it's like, you know, you're married, you live in fucking Westchester with your, tenured college professor fucking husband who has a trust fund. It's like,
Right,
go
right.
fuck yourself. Um, or you're a Nepo baby, and it's just like, stop.
Yeah.
But for most people, it is you meet somebody, you fall in love, and you decide I want to be with that person, and kids are a natural outcrop of that. And I think that it's the way it's been for thousands of years, and but there always been versions of it. I mean, sometimes you see a lot of rich people who have kids, what I call kids as the accessory, and you kind of like kids.
If you have to import them from Mali.
Yeah, right. And the nanny raises them. But then again, that was very British upper class. The
Right,
nannies and the staff raised you. I mean,
right,
Churchill.
right, right.
The you know he,
100%.
he had a crazy syphilitic father, and or whatever it was. I think it was syphilis. I
I
can't
think so,
recall.
yeah.
And mom was kind of off doing her own thing. Who was, he definitely married out of class. The father
Mhm.
definitely married out of class. He married a social climber actress.
Mm.
Um, but and he
Churchill did?
Randolph Churchill, the father,
His son.
Winston Chur- or Randolph Churchill, Winston Churchill's father, married an actress.
I thought he married a a robber baron's daughter, which was kind of par for the course at the time, but I guess not. I thought
Maybe I
the
got it
Churchill
wrong.
family needed an injection of capital, and the
Maybe that's it.
family
Maybe that you're right. That's what it was.
that
But
was
again,
very common in the Gilded Age in
but
that
but
time
she
period.
was below his social class. He had the
Oh yeah,
title.
100%.
Well,
Yeah, yeah. She was an American for Christ's sake, and
well,
this guy's an aristocrat.
well, you can go to Jackie Onassis marrying RFK. I mean, she came from the higher classes, and he was,
Yeah,
nobody's boy.
yeah, yeah. I've seen
Yeah.
Grey Gardens. I know.
Right?
Um,
Yeah. How about that? It's fucking weird. But
well, so speaking of nepo babies, just to bring this out for a
yeah.
second, then is there is there a world where we are entering as America the same kind of realm where starting will we start to see an alignment of succession? I think our politics is way too sclerotic for this, but is there starting to be now with some of the bills that are being passed, it looks to me like some of the consolidation of power that there will start to be succession plans for who takes over next, who's does it become something that's handed off rather than something that's truly decided? And I don't know if we've ever had something truly decided, by the way, but
Yeah, I think voters are angry and pissed off and always amazing, and they punish people, they punish politicians, which I didn't appreciate when one of my campaigns being punished.
Mm,
But I think in the long view, I kind of certainly enjoyed it.
mm,
That just decided at a certain point we've had a fuck enough of you people, and literally it's Donald Trump's The Apprentice. You're fired,
mhm.
and take no prisoners. I mean, the Bush dynasty. I mean, Jeb got fucking destroyed. I mean,
Yeah,
Hillary got destroyed. You want to see somebody lose their mind? You talk about Chelsea Clinton in in 32. What but
yeah, yeah,
RFK. I mean Kennedys. I mean the Kennedy clan. That's kind of burned itself out. I mean,
yeah.
you know, what is always interesting is that like when people are always calling for radical change and revolution, and it's like you don't want that because you think you're going to be the fucking tarot card reader in the fucking commune, and you're not. You're going to be working like mining fucking iron ore on the night.
Right.
That's how this shit works. Um,
Totally. You're
you
100% right.
and which you look at the Russian Revolution, and a lot of the fomentation of it was on the upper classes who wanted reform, and they didn't have the power, the intelligence, or the sophistication to figure out how to do that reform. And they're like, "We'll back the revolution."
Right.
Not a good idea.
Right. Right.
You know?
Yeah, it's very similar to anytime you talk to somebody about past lives, they're always somebody important like Cleopatra. They're never like,
Right?
oh, yeah, no, I was the guy who threw out the shit pan for the king.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah. I
Uh,
was the cabin boy who was raped on the fucking raped on the fucking trawler for 20 years of my life. You know?
Speaking of raping on trawlers,
Yeah.
what what's going on with Peter Thiel's takeover of Washington? I don't think we were recording when we started
Right
talking
now
about
we're hitting
the.
right. What do we call it? Liberty City? Is that the new name?
I guess there are a couple of these. I saw a short 15-minute, maybe it
Yeah.
was like a CNN reports about this one outside of San Francisco where, a libertarian's wet dream kind of thing. Although every time that's been tried, it collapses in on itself in some horrible disaster. But I guess in the big beautiful bill, correct me if I'm wrong, there's something in there about giving Palantir like the ability to monitor all Americans, build a database, an AI database of all
Mhm.
Americans. And then there was this woman on X that said something about, I guess she works in DC or something, but that there's a move now to give Peter Thiel control over the military district of Washington. How that would happen, because what most people don't realize is that it is a military district. Ultimately, that's the ultimate authority. But yeah, what would that look like? And is that even remotely close to ever happening?
I mean, we know at the turn of the century with like Henry Ford, for instance, had his own places, had his own like
Mhm.
literally minor places, and I think Frick too had something in Pennsylvania.
Like
Or
company towns or beyond that?
beyond that, like literally they were company towns, but they also had Christ, I can't think now where I used to live, Cape May Point. It was an incorporation, but it was a privately owned little town.
Yeah, like
Um,
where Disney World is in Florida.
yeah,
Yeah,
and so that kind of has been there. Good luck taking over anything and running it properly. Um,
especially DC.
oh yeah, like Peter Thiel has a large fortune. He could make that a small fortune really fucking quickly.
Totally.
Trying to fund and figure out DC
I
and
can tell him how to become a millionaire overnight.
right. That was the old joke, right? I made a small fortune in X. I started with a large fortune.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I mean, there was the whole kind of oligarchical thing about billionaires buying newspapers,
Mm,
and that was supposed to be the end of the world until they realized that even they couldn't make it. Basically they bought wagon wheel factories,
that's right.
which is really kind of interesting. I mean, it's interesting to see newspapers just kind of die and dying, and if you're my age, I think you lament it a little bit. But if you're my son's age, you're like, fuck it. It's like it's not part of your culture.
Yeah.
It,
Yeah.
it's like, I really miss watching the Lone Ranger on TV. What? You
right,
know,
right, right.
right? I don't
Yeah,
know
yeah.
what that is.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I think everything has to go away. What I do think is that I think probably the same. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think the same arguments were made? I mean, I would say the first uh, or the first inkling of the death nail of the papers was radio, then TV. I mean, it's like it's been slowly eating away at their monopoly for a while, right? And then I'm sure people said the same thing. I know for a fact that people lamented the radio for when it
Yeah,
first came out as well, right? So,
yeah. So here's an interesting sidelight, which is kind of a little tangential, but I thought it was really interesting, is the idea of objective journalism.
mm,
When newspapers started out, I mean, I always say in New York City at the turn of the century, the 1920s, there were 32 dailies. Um, you know, German language, Gaelic, blah, blah, blah. But there was also the communist paper, the socialist paper, the fascist paper. There were
right,
all these things. Um, at some point, and I'll go back to Philly, John Wanamaker decided, you know what? I can advertise in newspapers.
mm,
And so literally these kind of early 20th century capitalists figured out, and the newspapers figured out pretty quickly, well, if these things are really biased or have one side or unfair or, kind of angry and calling for revolution, you know, I can't sell my fucking window shades.
right,
I can't sell my, you know, axle grease. And so newspapers became more objective, and I'll put that in quotes because that's a whole other debate.
right.
But they became more objective and more mainstream and more kind of culturally sensitive to what was going on around them because these capitalists wanted to sell their shit,
To
their
everyone.
advertising.
Yeah, yeah,
And I
yeah.
think what has happened is that newspapers are no longer, nobody uses newspapers to sell shit anymore. It's either it's on, you know, you can do it on the internet. You can do, I mean, eBay. I mean, think if you didn't have eBay and Craigslist, how much fucking advertising newspapers would have. Holy fuck, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Um, but I think what happened is that was really the started the decay, and I think people complaining about biases in newspapers, which is a whole other story, or biases in media, it's because the capitalists don't need them anymore.
Mm,
You don't need them to sell shit anymore. There's no reason for them not to be niche, not to go back to what they were.
yeah,
And you can argue is going back to what they were, a million small little things, a bad thing?
right.
It's a debate, but it's a regression. But I'm not prepared to say that it's a real bad one.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, my only sense is I don't care if there's a Fox News right wing
Yeah,
version on the news.
yeah,
Everybody's got their own take.
yeah,
By the way, I don't know if we've talked about it before on the show, but All Sides and Ground News are two amazing resources for trying to find all sides of the news and the middle road, right? Trying to understand where the facts really are and where the perspectives are. I think the more troubling aspect is that, Fox News has admitted in court that Tucker Carlson is not a news show. When it was Tucker Carlson, it is an entertainment show, and that no reasonable person would think that it was a news show.
yeah.
That either says that the country's full of very unreasonable people or that's full of shit. They do portray it as a news show. Um, and it is doing a disservice to the public discourse. Do they have a responsibility to public discourse? I don't know. But if they're going to have certain protections for them as media, then I think, yeah, you do have a responsibility along with that. Um, okay. I mean, I think that's an interesting perspective. I think, also marketing has become more and more niche down and targeted. So
Yeah.
they don't care if, X number of million of people aren't watching it. What they care is, are those people that we want to reach watching it,
Right.
right?
And if you want to find out what a news station is or a TV station is made of, look at who their advertisers are.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
Exactly.
Fox News is Depends and Life Insurance and Larks. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. And buy
uh,
gold.
buy gold, right?
All right. So the last thing I wanted to ask you is, am I getting this right? Did Elon Musk steal everybody's favorite Himmler's wife, Stephen Miller's wife?
No, but I don't know if that's true, but I'm certainly going to go with it because it's fucking great.
Well, she
But
definitely went to work for him, right?
yeah, no, she's going. I mean, whether it was a sexual thing. I mean, Elon Musk impregnating Stephen Miller's wife would be like, I would contact my congressman and say we need to make that a national holiday because
For sure.
it's so fucking funny. I mean, talk about something out of a sitcom. No, but apparently he got her to go work for him. And the whole stories about like Elon on ketamine and shit are
I
fucking
mean,
wild.
Dude, have you seen any of these videos of him in that last Oval Office briefing?
Yeah, I
That
mean,
guy's fucking blitzed out of his mind. He's got a black eye. People pointed
yeah,
out other marks. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if he didn't get clocked by Stephen Miller and is taking his wife.
yeah,
That would not surprise me based on the way the guy looked.
yeah. I mean, he looks totally fucking. He looks like an '80s bender, right?
Totally.
You
And
know?
I love his little bitch ass response too. He's like, I had little X hit me. Like, did you really just pawn that shit off on your little like 3-year-old son?
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
talk about like, I would never commit a crime with that guy. He will throw anybody under the bus,
anybody
including
has
his
it.
3-year-old son. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, I mean, blame the kid. He's got a trust fund. Fuck him, right?
yeah,
But
right, right. He wants my money. Screw
he
him.
wants my money. You want my money? You take the fall. It's like an old mob operation. Yeah,
Is
literally,
is
if you take the fall, you go to prison. You'll have money when you come out.
That's right. That's right. Is Elon Musk? Is he in the phase now of rehabilitating himself at the expense of Trump as he's come out against the big beautiful bill as they call it?
Actually, forgetting how misdirected he is, I think he kind of diagnoses the problem pretty accurately. The fact that he was, maybe whacked out of his mind trying to do Dodge is a different fucking story. But I think he's kind of been consistent with that. I think what's kind of interesting is that, like, Musk genius saver, Musk Nazi, Musk turned on Trump, and like he's going to go back to being genius saver again. Like,
Yeah,
and all these people out, I don't know where you are, but out in LA, like all these Tesla drivers have these little, I bought this before. It's like, you know, don't blame
yeah,
me. It's the only car. It's like,
yeah.
I want to fucking ram your car just
Totally.
because it's like, why would you care what somebody says about your fucking car?
Yeah, if you bought a Ford, that doesn't make you a Nazi.
Right. Yeah. Fucking Henry Ford. I mean, there was a really funny thing. The actress Alyssa Milano,
Oh yeah.
she had this
Man,
thing
she
when,
was like my dream girl when I was younger.
so she had this thing about that she got, because of Musk going with Trump and doing all this stuff, she got rid of Tesla because she can't support this kind of fascism. So she bought a better electric car. She bought a fucking Volkswagen. And I'm like, and it was like one of those things that like I had to go find if that was real. And it was like, yeah, it was real. And you just want to go like, and when you read shit like
Never
that,
done anything bad.
but when you read shit like that, you really hope that there's some fucking evil genius kid that's running her social media account
Totally.
and seeing how much shit he can get away with.
A
You
hundred
know?
percent.
I mean, that's what you really hope for life.
Speaking of, have you ever seen Marathon Man?
Yeah, love it.
You know the movie starts, right? The Jewish guy hits the Laurence Olivier's Mercedes. The Jewish guy was in the concentration camp, and he's like Nazi, and he
Yeah,
like
yeah,
runs this like Cadillac into the
yeah.
Mercedes. Yeah, 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 yeah.
So, by the way, in the book is very good too. William Goldman.
Oh, I didn't know
In
it
the,
was based on a book.
yeah, William Goldman, and the book is interesting because
The same William Goldman from the movies?
yeah,
Oh shit. Okay.
yeah.
All right.
And in the book, in the movie, Roy Scheider plays Dustin Hoffman's brother, who's in the
Mm-hmm.
movie for like 2 seconds,
Yeah.
and he gets killed. In the book, the brother's gay.
Oh. Roy Scheider's character is gay.
Yeah, and that's how they and that's how they figure out how to kill him. And there's this whole thing about him being gay, and and it was, so the book was written in like 72 or something, and it's really fucking
Yeah.
wild that. And if you watch the movie again and you know the character's gay, you kind of go,
Okay.
yeah,
I think we got to leave it there, man. That's
yeah,
amazing. I was thinking though, one thing that we could end on is like based on the thing I sent you on X about that family in Tallahassee, Florida,
yeah,
is like I feel like we need to do a call out for assholes of the week.
yeah. Asshole of the week. We should do that.
And they should be the inaugural ones. I don't know if anybody heard. I don't know if it's true. And the kids' faces were shown, which actually bothered me a little bit. But apparently, that the bust by ICE at that construction site in Tallahassee, it was the family that hired all those fucking people that called ICE because they didn't want to pay the salaries after the work was done.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Assholes of the century there, man. That's
Right.
insane.
You got
And you
to
know
be.
what? That honestly though, it's interesting how they've exposed themselves to law enforcement because now since they called, that means they knowingly hired illegal immigrants, which in itself is a crime.
It's a crime. Yeah.
Anyway, Will they get their comeuppance? I doubt it.
Let's hope.
Let's hope. All right.
All right,
I'll
man.
see you in a week, Chris.
You bet.
Bye.
Draft picks in the Senate, game on the floor. Campaign slogans echo final scores. Analysis deep as the trench warfare set. We break it down, no sweat, no net. Balance and touchdowns, where's your bet? Candidate playbooks, lines we set. Irreverent and free, we call it out. Competition fierce, ain't no doubt. Blitz and a Hail Mary pass. Legislation touchdowns, who's top class? Elections heated, brackets tight. Political fantasy, bring the night. Cynical plays and cynical ploys. Draft your politicians, trade your boys. Tackle the issues, fumble through lies. Only the sharp survive in our eyes. Campaign trails and field goals fade. Winners and